Imagine standing on a rocking deck, holding a live grenade with the pin pulled and dropping it into a pressurized tube while a Stuka dive bomber screams toward you. This was the daily reality for crews operating the Holman projector. It was dangerous, it was crude, and it was prone to failure, yet 4,500 of them were sent to sea. Why did Britain bet so much on such an imperfect solution? In 1940, British merchant losses were rising. Attacks often came from low altitude. Convoy escorts could not cover every hull. Many freighters sailed with limited armament. Defensive equipment was issued under shortage conditions. The Admiralty prioritised heavier guns for warships. Merchant ships received whatever industry could supply. That gap defined the Holman requirement. The problem was not elegance. The problem was immediate deck survival. As German aircraft attacked during approach runs, low trajectories reduced reaction time aboard cargo ships. Conventional anti-aircraft guns were scarce. Ammunition supply also remained constrained. Cordite consumption was a planning concern. Training standards varied across civilian crews. Deck space was limited on small merchantmen. Weight allowances were tightly managed. Maintenance capacity at sea was minimal. Anything fitted had to be simple. Anything fitted had to be cheap. Anything fitted had to be installable quickly. The Holman concept matched those conditions. It was a stopgap by design. It aimed to disrupt attacks, not dominate airspace. Its value depended on timing and visibility. Its value also depended on intimidation. A low-flying pilot needed only seconds. A defending crew needed a fast response. Admiralty accepted imperfect solutions in 1940. Holman entered that administrative opening. The target environment was merchant shipping first. Later use spread to other small craft. The threat profile justified short-range barrage weapons. High-altitude bombers remained outside practical Holman reach. Dive and low-level attack runs were different. They crossed the defended zone briefly. A fragment cloud could affect pilot behavior. A smoke burst could alter attack geometry. Even near misses could force higher release points. Higher release points reduced bombing accuracy. That trade was acceptable to planners. The weapon was therefore procedural. It was not a prestige system. It was a wartime expedient. Its later reputation reflects that origin. The title sounds comic. The procurement context was not comic. The system emerged from scarcity management. It also emerged from industrial improvisation. Holmans in Camborne built pneumatic equipment. The firm already understood compressors and valves. That industrial background shaped the first design. Trevor Holman pushed the wartime adaptation idea. The concept borrowed from mortar logic. The inspiration chain included Stokes mortar practice. The projectile would drop down a tube. The launch impulse would come from pressure. The company could build such hardware rapidly. Early experiments tested feasibility, not elegance. A prototype threw a heavy steel weight. Reported distance was roughly 100 yards. That result cleared the first objection. The idea could launch useful mass. The next problem was standard ammunition. British ships already had Mills grenades, and the projector was adapted around that grenade. A carrier canister solved the fuse lever problem. The grenade needed its lever restrained. The canister held the lever during loading. Launch acceleration sent the assembly upward. Air resistance separated the canister in flight. The grenade then completed its fuse delay. This solved arming without barrel rifling. It also matched existing supply channels. Grenades were already stocked widely. New projectile factories were less necessary. That reduced procurement friction immediately. Materials planning also favoured the projector. The design relied on mild steel. Cast iron components were also sufficient. These materials were less strategic. High-grade gun steel remained under pressure elsewhere. Machining demands were comparatively modest. Installation was simpler than naval cannon mounting. The weapon did not require heavy recoil structures. That mattered for smaller merchant decks. It also mattered for fast-fitting programs. Naval authorities tested the early model officially. Mark I trials were reported in February 1940. The trial outcome supported immediate orders. An initial order for 1,000 followed. That order size shows administrative confidence. It also shows urgency in 1940. Holman was not treated as final doctrine. Holman was treated as available output. Production speed beat perfection in that phase. The first model used compressed air bottles. Compressed air suited workshop-built pneumatic practice. Bottle charging created a logistic requirement ashore. Ships needed replenished high-pressure cylinders. That burden was manageable in port, it was less ideal for longer deployments. Even so, the Mark I moved forward. The launcher tube was unrifled steel. Reported barrel length was 4.5 feet. The bore accepted the grenade canister directly. Loading was from the muzzle. Early operation used a Stokes-like trigger principle. Round impact on the base initiated firing. This simplified the firing cycle. It also reduced some operator actions. A trained crew could cycle quickly. Reported rates reached 30 rounds per minute. That figure depended on crew practice. It also depended on preparation discipline. Pressure supply determined sustained firing limits. Air bottles reportedly supported about 50 rounds. Trial height reached roughly 600 feet. Height figures mattered more than accuracy claims. The intended effect was a burst curtain. A direct hit remained unlikely. The Admiralty still accepted the exchange. The low-cost volume mattered during emergency fitting. Field reports then shaped the second version. Steam trawlers had another constraint set. They had steam available continuously. They also suffered exposed weather conditions. Pneumatic valves rusted in those conditions. Steam substitution looked attractive on paper. Steam also removed dependence on air bottles. Boiler pressure was already aboard. However, steam introduced condensation problems. Condensed water in lines interrupted firing. That required a trigger redesign. The Mark II abandoned the original automatic drop fire method. Operators now controlled discharge more directly. A pilot valve charged a receiver chamber. A pressure gauge confirmed launch pressure. A second valve released the shot. This sequence slowed errors. It also made steam use practical. The system stayed mechanically crude. Crude design was partly intentional. Complexity would have blocked shipboard maintenance. The barrel sat on a traversing base. A simple anti-aircraft sight was fitted. The sight was functional, not precise. Crew organization remained small. A layer aimed the barrel. A loader prepared and dropped rounds. Minimal crew demand suited merchant operations. Merchant crews already had multiple duties. Training time therefore remained limited. The Holman drill was procedural and brief. Remove pin under controlled handling. Seat grenade inside its carrier canister. Load from muzzle on command. Check pressure indication. Traverse and elevate on estimated approach. Fire during the aircraft run. Repeat while the target remained low. Those steps looked simple on paper. They were less simple at sea. A deck roll altered elevation constantly. Wind affected both aim and canister behavior. Steam pressure varied with engine conditions. Crew fatigue reduced timing accuracy. Noise masked shouted corrections. Salt exposure degraded fittings and gauges. None of these factors improved precision. All of them were routine. That is why records describe disruption effects. They do not describe precision gunnery. The grenade itself imposed more limits. Fuse timing was short and fixed. Launch velocity varied with pressure consistency. Burst altitude therefore varied shot by shot. Without rifling, dispersion increased further. Without tracers, correction was approximate. Sights were crude, not predictive. No fire control system supported the crew. This was manual barrage work. The projectile chain still merits close attention. And a standard Mills grenade formed the warhead. The grenade sat inside a metal canister. Canadian Museum descriptions preserve this arrangement clearly. The canister was two-part metal. Its job was retention and transport. It restrained the grenade lever safely. It also presented a barrel-friendly external shape. After launch, air drag separated the canister. The grenade then functioned on its fuse. A fragment burst followed seconds later. A smoke puff accompanied the burst. That visible puff mattered tactically. It advertised a defended ship. It also complicated pilot perception. Incoming crews judged risk quickly. Large black bursts suggested heavier weapons. Holman benefited from that visual exaggeration. The device therefore exploited psychology through mechanics. Its engineering limits became part of function. Now, that outcome was not purely accidental. Operators learned to fire salvos. Multiple bursts looked more dangerous than one. Rapid salvos also widened coverage. This consumed ammunition quickly. That cost was usually acceptable during attack runs. Crew drills therefore emphasized rate and timing. They did not promise exact hits. Technical documentation and later summaries agree there. The Mark II also widened installation options. Steam trawlers were an obvious fit. Minesweepers also used steam plants widely. Destroyers and motor gunboats saw fittings. Light craft valued low recoil loads. Deck reinforcement demands remained moderate. The projector could sit where guns could not. That flexibility helped procurement offices. One mount served multiple hull categories. Aldershot demonstrations supported this argument. One famous demonstration lacked proper ammunition. Beer bottles were reportedly fired instead. The smooth bore allowed irregular projectiles. The bottles still reached the target area. This incident reinforced the launcher's reputation. It also reinforced the cordite-saving argument. The Prime Minister reportedly praised that economy point. Later retellings amplified the anecdote. Potato stories came from that culture. Some accounts mark them as apocryphal. The stories persisted because the physics allowed it. A wide, smooth barrel accepts improvisation. Crews under shortage conditions improvise. That combination made the legend durable. The nickname survived longer than the doctrine. The technical core remained unchanged. Pressure source replaced chemical propellant, tube launch replaced conventional gun recoil, and canister geometry replaced rifling stability. A timed grenade replaced a shell fuse setter. Every compromise was visible. Each compromise reduced manufacturing burden. Each compromise also reduced accuracy. The Admiralty accepted both columns. Holman therefore belongs to emergency engineering. His performance must be read that way. By 1941, further revision continued. Mark III production began during wartime demand. The Mark III was semi-automatic. It could fire salvos more efficiently. Reported projectile height increased to about 1,000 feet. That expanded the useful engagement window slightly. It did not transform hit probability. It improved coverage and tempo instead. Another 1,000 were reportedly ordered. Coastal gunboats and light craft were targeted. Low recoil remained a selling point. Maurice Oram is associated with development leadership. He appears in early trial references. Later accounts connect him to Portsmouth trials. He was later honoured after successful demonstrations. Those commemorative details reflect wartime publicity culture. They also reflect local industrial pride. Camborne's engineering identity mattered in the story. Cornish industrial firms sought wartime relevance. Holman secured it through adaptation. Development work also involved rejection paths. A short-barrel Mark IV was planned. A swivel-base variant was considered. By then, timing had changed. Better anti-aircraft systems entered wider supply. Oerlikon availability improved compared with 1940. The Holman window began to close. That decline was logistical before symbolic. Procurement priorities shifted to proven cannon. And a grenade projector could not compete. Its accuracy ceiling remained too low, its ammunition effect remained limited. Its maintenance simplicity no longer outweighed those weaknesses. Still, technical details explain continued use. A Holman mount required less deck structure. A Holman mount cost less material. A Holman crew needed less specialization. Small vessels kept such systems longer. Merchant ships also retained stopgap fittings. Training establishments kept projector practice alive. IWM records show DEMS range training at Cardiff. A 1943 photograph documents Holman handling there. That date is significant. It shows service life beyond initial emergency months. It also shows continued training bureaucracy. Doctrine outlived peak enthusiasm, replacement always moved unevenly across fleets. Battlefield use therefore remained mixed. First deployments centered on merchant defense. Convoy routes created repeated attack patterns. Crews learned to anticipate approach angles. The Holman was aimed into that corridor. It was fired during low runs. The goal was disruption timing. Successful use depended on crew composure. Crews had to prepare grenades safely. They also had to judge elevation quickly. Safety procedure was constant concern. Pins were removed before loading. Levers had to remain controlled in canisters. Dropped canisters on deck were dangerous. Steam lines near operators were hazardous. Pressure checks reduced burst risk uncertainty. Misfire drills required immediate discipline. A hanging round could not be ignored. A blocked tube stopped the whole drill. Condensation in steam lines worsened reliability. Rusted fittings worsened reliability again. A deck spray worsened both conditions. Testing ashore did not fully capture this. Field use exposed those differences immediately. Reports repeatedly separate trials from sea conditions. That gap shaped command evaluations. In calm conditions, the system looked effective enough. In rough weather, timing degraded quickly. In convoy confusion, communication also degraded. Merchant crews were not specialist gunners. Some ships had naval DEMS personnel. Others relied on limited instruction. Skill variation changed results more than design tables. Even so, the projector produced outcomes. Direct kills were uncommon. Damage claims exist in wartime reporting. One early report described a damaged Heinkel. Some later summaries cite small numbers of downings. Those numbers remained modest, the larger effect was deterrence. And a visible barrage forced tactical hesitation. Pilots sometimes broke off earlier, pilots sometimes released from poorer angles. That reduced hit probability against the ship. IWM catalogue notes describe exactly that trade. The weapon rarely destroyed aircraft outright. It still could reduce bombing accuracy. For merchant defence, that mattered. A missed bomb was a strategic success. Holman crews were judged on survival. They were not judged on gunner prestige. Operational handling also included ammunition economy. Mill's grenades were not unlimited aboard. Grenade allocation competed with other tasks. Some vessels carried mixed loads. Illuminating rounds also existed for projector use. Ammunition type changed crew expectations. High explosive loads served deterrent barrage use. Illuminating loads served visibility tasks when required. Both types fit the same launcher logic. Improvised loads emerged under shortage or boredom. Beer bottles were demonstration theatre. Potatoes were wartime folklore and occasional practice. Tin cans and scrap objects fit the bore. Such loads rarely offered lethal effect, they offered noise and surprise. Against low-flying aircraft, surprise still mattered. Crew stories preserve these episodes. Official documents preserve the procurement rationale. Both records describe the same machine differently. One record calls it practical, another record calls it absurd. Both descriptions can be true. The Holman sat at that boundary. It was a weapon. It was also a pressure tube. Its battlefield identity depended on context. On a lightly armed coaster, it mattered. On a warship with proper guns, less so. That relative value shaped deployment choices. Procurement offices moved units accordingly. Distribution complexity also slowed replacement. A ship awaiting refit kept old equipment. A new cannon required mount, sights, ammunition. It also required better training pipelines. Holman could remain until those arrived. That is why service overlap persisted. Mark I, Mark II and Mark III periods overlapped. Administrative records often lagged frontline reality. A ship could carry obsolescence for months. The projector's low recoil encouraged such delay. It did not threaten deck integrity. It did not demand complex spares. Valves and pipes were familiar to engineers. Steam engineers understood pressure behavior intuitively. That compatibility improved shipboard acceptance. Accuracy complaints did not erase usability, they only limited expectations. Expectations are central to Holman history. Commands used it as a stopgap. Crews used it as available defense. Enemy pilots saw bursts and smoke. They often could not assess caliber quickly. That asymmetry favored the defender briefly. Holman was built for that brief moment. Psychological impact appears in institutional language. Reports mention deterrence more than destruction. Safety reports mention handling risk consistently. Procurement files emphasize scarcity and speed. Command evaluations compare it with absent alternatives. That comparison kept Holman in service. It was measured against nothing available. Later, it was measured against Oerlikons. The comparison then changed decisively. A 20mm cannon offered direct fire. It offered better range and lethality. It offered predictable ballistics. That it demanded more production resources. Once those resources became available, Holman declined. No bureaucratic ceremony was required. Orders simply shifted elsewhere. Planned Mark IV work lost urgency. Design effort followed stronger programs. Existing mounts remained where useful. Some projector units found secondary roles. Later accounts mention grapnel launching adaptations. Others mention use against small submarines. These uses were niche and situational. They did not reverse the decline. The core anti-aircraft problem had moved on. Aircraft speed and tactics were changing. Defensive standards were rising. A grenade projector could not keep pace. Post-war judgment was therefore narrow. It was rarely praised for accuracy. It was often remembered for improvisation. Historians also note its deterrent logic. Her museum notes preserve that interpretation. So do surviving canisters and grenades. Those artifacts explain the mechanism immediately. They also explain why crews improvised loads. The bore was permissive. The pressure system was adaptable. The doctrine was temporary. All three features define the legacy. Around 4,500 projectors reportedly entered service. That total reflects scale, not prestige. Few emergency systems reached that footprint. Fewer still left such strange anecdotes. The potato stories dominate popular memory. The procurement record tells another story. The Admiralty needed deck defences quickly. Holman delivered a manufacturable answer. Its failures were visible. Its utility was still real in context. It bought time for better weapons, it altered some attack profiles, it gave merchant crews another procedure. In 1940, the procedure itself had value. The Holman projector now survives mostly in museums. An Imperial War Museum example records merchant service purpose. Canadian Museum ammunition examples show the canister design. The device reads as improvised engineering. The record reads as structured wartime compromise. Both readings are accurate. The steam-fed projector was never elegant. It was a boiler-powered stopgap launcher. It remained in service until replacements spread. Its most famous ammunition became a joke. Its original function remained convoy defense. That combination explains its persistence in memory. The Holman projector was a British emergency answer. It was built for scarcity, not perfection. It worked best as visible disruption. It failed as precision anti